talk next about natural support on either side of the equation. So if we've got constipation and you've already looked at food and you've looked at stress and you're moving and you're getting fiber and you're getting plenty of exercise and activity, plenty of good sleep, what are some things that you can do if you're doing everything right but you're still struggling here? Look at nutrients. Some nutrients are required for your bowels to function. This is a conversation most doctors don't have with their patients. For example, the muscular function of your GI tract, as I mentioned earlier, requires nutrients. It requires electrolytes specifically. And so, again, some of the big problems, we'll see calcium, we'll see magnesium as a potential problem here. We'll see B vitamins and B vitamin, I should say, these are all, when I say we'll see these deficiencies, right? So we'll see reduction of these things as a potential trigger or reason why constipation is occurring. These are nutritional deficiencies that can lead to a reduced capacity for the nerves to communicate to the muscles of the bowel, allowing that peristaltic motion or wave of motion to push through. Sometimes what happens is if you deal with all your stress, how many of you have ever had, like when you're really, really stressed, your shoulders get really, really tense and you get all kinds of knots in your back and they don't go away even if your stress goes away, and you got to have somebody work them out. Maybe you go see a massage therapist or a chiropractor to work those knots out. This can sometimes happen in your bowels. So sometimes your bowels can knot up, right? And just like your back muscles can knot up. And so sometimes, I've seen cases where people were really backed up, really constipated, and what it took to break through was not just to get rid of the form of the stress, but it also took some massage, intestinal massage. So some masseuses actually train, and they train in methodologies that can actually loosen up the muscles within the colon and in the intestines as well. So sometimes it takes a release. Sometimes the diaphragm, it's a muscle, can get really, really tight, and it can create or contribute to constipation, and that has to be released, just like a knot or a muscle spasm would have to be released. So sometimes to relieve constipation, manual therapies can be very effective, and you should look at these. Another very natural type of therapy that can overcome constipation is castor oil. Castor oil directly applied, like you can apply to a cloth or a towel, you can apply castor oil over the small intestines, and sometimes that oil, it'll get things moving, it'll get things pushing through. I've seen cases where major constipation were dramatically relieved or broken through as a result of using castor oil packs, right there over the intestine. Additionally, sometimes we'll see people that are under so much stress that no matter what they do to try to relieve it, there's just not an end in sight and the stress continues. There's something called sensory deprivation. It's another type of therapy that I've seen work well in people that were chronically constipated. Sensory deprivation is sometimes also referred to as a float tank. And the mechanism here is that what this does is it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It turns it back on by depriving your body of external sensation. You deprive yourself of sight, sound, gravity, and temperature sensation in a float tank. That's what it does. We don't have time to get into all the details of it tonight, but what it does is it drives parasympathetic activation. So if you're sympathetic dominant, this is one of the easiest ways to reactivate the parasympathetic nervous system in a very, very effective way. So other folks will do things here like meditate, or they'll do prayer and meditation because for them it calms them down, it relaxes them. But ultimately, again, it's hard to have a good, healthy bowel movement when you're tense, when you're tight, when your intestines are locked up. So doing things that can break free of that can be very helpful. Now, sometimes what has to happen is we just got to pull more water into the bowel, and that's where vitamin C, that's where magnesium, these are osmotics, right? So they can pull water into your bowel, and they're non-toxic. So these are both kind of like non-toxic ways to push a bowel movement. It's not something you should have to do every day all the time, but if you're really locked up initially, this can be an effective way to have a non-toxic non-laxative based bowel movement that's not habit forming. And then probiotics. Remember that a lot of your energy production, B vitamin production, comes from good bacteria that sit inside or that live inside of your intestine. And so a lot of people today, because of antibiotic use, because of chronic antibiotic exposures, whether that be through drinking water, through animals that they're eating, or through pesticides they're getting through non-organic fruits and vegetables, the problem can come with a overall reduction in the quantitative amount of good bacteria that live in the GI tract. Remember, these good bacteria produce what? They produce mucin, which provides it provides a barrier to the GI tract, but it also provides a mucus that helps push bowels through. They also produce B vitamins, and they also help you digest your food. So if you're low in healthy, good flora, then those in and of itself, those deficiencies per se, will lead to the potential for constipation. So these are all things that can be done. Again, if you're constipated, these are natural things that you can do that are very simple, home-based therapeutics that may just solve a major problem that you're having if you've got chronic constipation. Now, if you have diarrhea, it's a little bit different. With diarrhea, you don't necessarily want to use vitamin C or magnesium in high doses, because that pulls water into the bowel, and if you've already got plenty of water coming through your bowel, you don't want more. So with diarrhea, it's a little bit different of a story. And so, again, probably one of the biggest and most important for diarrhea is the probiotic. And this has to do with, remember, one of the common causes of diarrhea outside of the wrong food is intestinal, we refer to it as dysbiosis. Abnormal microorganisms living inside of your intestine, creating irritation, leading to that diarrhea. So probiotics can be helpful. Why? Because probiotics create competition for any other type of abnormal microorganisms that are trying to set up shop within your GI tract. So intestinal dysbiosis, how do we get rid of that? Well, we can support our body's ability to fend off things through good, solid probiotics. Now, sometimes this requires more than just what you might find in a cup of yogurt, or more than what you might find in an over-the-counter supplement. Because sometimes if the dysbiosis is bad enough, you require hundreds of billions of CFU. That stands for colony forming units. That's the measure of a probiotic. So if you ever look at a probiotic label, it'll list the measurement as a CFU, a colony forming unit. Hundreds of billions. Most over-the-counter products are 10 billion. Some of them are as high as 30 or 40 billion, but not hundreds of billions. And sometimes if this is bad enough, it requires a pretty strong probiotic. We actually formulated one for this very reason called Ultrabiotic Defense. It's got several hundred billion colony-forming units, predominant species that thrive and live in the gut and help to stabilize and balance the GI tract. So that's one of the things that you can do, that you can take orally, supplementally, that might be of great benefit. Additionally, with diarrhea, one of the other issues that I have seen in a lot of folks, this is especially true of those with a history of gluten issues, is zinc deficiency. Zinc deficiency, L-glutamine deficiency. L-glutamine is an amino acid, zinc is a mineral. Either one of these are very common causes nutritionally, of chronic diarrhea of unexplainable origin. And so you might consider zinc supplementation, you might consider L-glutamine supplementation to support the bowel function. Other things that you want to look at, again, with diarrhea, as I mentioned before, is food sensitivity, food intolerance, and food allergy, because those can all be irritants. So one of the best diets I've seen work for diarrhea without the need for any other additional support is the no grain, no pain diet. And why? And there's two versions of the no grain, no pain diet. Phase 2 is the version I'm talking about, because phase 2 doesn't just eliminate grain and dairy and sugar, but also eliminates some of your more difficult to digest food items like those legumes that we were talking about earlier. So this diet, in a sense, actually removes all the more difficult to digest things that are very common irritants to the GI tract that can trigger diarrhea. So if you haven't read No Grain, No Pain or don't have a copy, you can pick one up at Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can check it out at your library for free. But I would highly encourage you to look at that and look at that diet as a major tool to help if you're struggling here, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen people with chronic diarrhea just follow the diet and completely resolve the issue. And this is, people that have had chronic diarrhea for years. So diet is very, very powerful, but it's more specifically, it's what you eliminate than what you necessarily add in. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.